What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them.
Yep.
In the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yeah.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at meals and asks me meals questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the meal that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine Pharmaceuticals.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy. And a big part of that is related to Canine Pharmaceuticals. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Pharmaceuticals and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
Check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined in the studio today by my co-host, Glenn Cook, and we've got our first guest of the year.
We
And
have,
it's
it
live
is.
in person.
Yeah, for the
I
year.
feel special being the first guest of the year.
You should.
You should.
Welcome to the show, Gavin Crown.
Thank you.
Hello, Gav.
Hello.
I was just thinking while I was doing this intro, when did I meet you? Maybe that was like 2019, 2018, something like that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that on the drive over. I think it's been at least 6-7 years.
Yeah. So you used to own or a part owner of, it was a big import company of gym equipment, and a friend of mine worked for you for a little while.
Yes.
And then I met you then. I went out and got some equipment. I've got a rack in my gym that was a prototype, one of a kind, didn't go to production rack that I got at a cheaper price from you, which I look at and don't use very much.
Did you make them or did you import them?
We imported them. We did a lot of our own design and work on it, but yeah, most of the stuff we had was all imported. So
I think we should get an overview of Gav because a lot of people, they'll go, who the fuck is Gavin?
Yeah.
Well,
So
let's find out who the fuck Gavin is.
Well, that's it. So I'm saying I met you a long time ago, and at the time we were talking dogs a little bit. You didn't have a dog and were interested
straight
in
away.
getting one.
yes.
And that's kind of how we became friends and have known each other since then. And you're part of the club now, and you've got a GSD that you're in the club with. Give us the rundown a little bit on your history and things you've done, and just establish yourself as a person that is worth listening to on the topic we're about to go into.
Sure. The main thing I've done over my life really has been sport and fitness. I've worked for CrossFit for the last 11 years, like working for CrossFit headquarters. The job I do there, to be a CrossFit trainer, you need to do your level 1 seminar. To advance as a trainer, you do your level 2 seminar. And I instruct on that. So essentially, I train the next generation of CrossFit trainers.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the main thing that I do. Yeah, I ran a fitness equipment company for a while. That was sort of fell into the side of it. But my passion's always been really in sport and in training others. Any sport I've ever done, whether it was jiu-jitsu or surf lifesaving or Muay Thai, I ended up instructing somehow. Same thing with CrossFit. Just kind of went into it from like a jiu-jitsu background and became an instructor. And a few years later, I started working for CrossFit itself. So yeah, I would say my experience with CrossFit, I try and be humble when I talk, but I would say I feel as though it makes me a bit of an expert in training people.
Okay.
Because it's really what we do.
Hey, Gavin.
Yes.
Have you ever heard that joke? How do you know if somebody's a CrossFitter?
Don't worry, they'll tell you.
That's the one.
And look,
So
it is true.
We have to first confront the elephant in the room.
Let's do that.
We have shit on CrossFit every opportunity we get on this podcast. For as long as I can, I have taken every opportunity to shit on CrossFit, every chance that I get. But in truth, I do that in jest because I think it's funny. And I think that CrossFit is a huge beast. It's a much bigger thing than a lot of people who say they do CrossFit and injure themselves and break their backs really do.
Absolutely.
And I think that at the individual level, a lot of CrossFit gyms are not actually CrossFit gyms, right? So like a lot of people who do inverted commas CrossFit don't realize, no, you don't, because it's a brand. It's a specific brand with specific hierarchy and learning and structure. Whereas a lot of people who are just like, I do tons of fucking burpees and terrible kettlebell swings, the small gym you're doing that in is often not actually a CrossFit affiliated.
Correct. There's a lot of like XFit out there and people who are, doing, look, CrossFit didn't invent high intensity interval training. It just packaged it. The founder of CrossFit, Greg Glassman, he's actually a really incredibly smart guy. To listen to him on podcasts, like the guy's next level intelligent.
We'd have to be to build and deliver something that many people have been working on for years. Like there's been so many initiatives in gyms and fitness industry, but to collaborate it into one business format and then be able to package it up and build a scope around it and put it out to the world, that's pretty amazing.
The funny part about that, and I don't want this whole episode to turn into the history of CrossFit, but the founder of CrossFit,
neither do we.
He never intended CrossFit to be what it is. It was actually others coming to him going, hey, what you're doing is kind of cool, because the people who were training with him were getting really fucking fit. Like, what is it that you do? Like, tell us about the methods and the methodologies and the theories behind what you're doing. And hey, can I affiliate to you? And his first response to that was, yeah, sure, but what's an affiliate? Right.
Yeah, right.
So he kind of never set out to build what CrossFit is. It kind of grew organically, which is, I think, why it's hung around longer than some of the other fads like F45 or
Orange Theory.
Yeah, they're sort of
Barry's.
Yeah.
Well, I think if in any format, if you actually listen to what your customers are saying and you work on that and implement some of those strategies, you can find that you'll achieve success in a broad spectrum of anything that you're trying to do. I feel that a lot of the times I've watched people fail. It's just that they get stuck in a rut. They put out a project or a product and then they say to people, you better like this because this is what I've got. And then people come up with a modification and they go, fuck, listen to these jonos whinging about my product. I've put a lot of love, sweat and tears into this. But the people who go, oh yeah, cool. What do you want modified in? What don't you like about it? What can I do in revision 2, revision 3, revision 4? Yeah. They're the people that I often see being successful in what they're doing. They listen to the people who are buying their product and therefore, they start seeing success that they deserve.
And I think especially in CrossFit's case, it's set out to go, well, what's our goal here? Let's build the fittest humans we possibly can. What works, what doesn't, keep what does, get rid of what doesn't. And you get exactly that. You get something that's endearing.
When did CrossFit start?
The first CrossFit gym would have been late 90s in California.
Right, okay.
I don't think it really kind of started making waves until like early 2000s.
Yeah, so I sort of became aware of it and I think it was 2008 or 2009, something like that. And that's when like my unit started showing a lot of interest in it. I think that probably had to do with, for our American audience, we had The Biggest Loser here in Australia, just like it's been run all around the world. And they started with 2 trainers that were very traditional PTs. And then they had like a few seasons into it, they had this like wild card trainer who was this guy, Steve Willis.
The commando.
Yeah, and they packaged him as this badass. It was really interesting, like knowing Steve a little bit, like his history certainly within the unit. He was called the Commando and he would turn up wearing camouflage pants, boots and a black singlet. And he was like...
Don't forget the sunglasses at night.
He would always wear sunglasses. And he spoke like a total fuckwit. Just one-liner delivers like he's the baddest motherfucker to ever walk the face of the earth. Now, like it's a character, it's a TV show, like they have to make it interesting and blah, blah, blah. But Steve was from my unit. That's why he was called the Commando, because he was a commando. But he was a commando like a long time ago, right? Like pre the GWAT. So like he wasn't involved in any of that. Steve's a nice guy. And I can't remember what year he went into it. It might have actually been maybe I was aware of CrossFit before 2009, because that was about maybe 2007 or something like that. I think he went into that. And he was a CrossFit guy. Like he had CFX, was it?
Yeah, CFX.
Yeah. So CFX was like one of the first. Him and Big Mick Shaw had like one of the first CrossFit gyms in Sydney, or maybe it was
in Australia.
Right. Okay. They were the first.
They were one of the first CrossFit gyms in Australia.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So him and Big Mick because Big Mick Shaw was another guy from my unit.
Yeah, he's an interesting cat.
Yeah. But both of them cool guys, But yeah, Steve had this like, I'm the commando. He actually came out to the unit and did a few workouts with us and blah, 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 right? And that CrossFit flavor was definitely got pretty heavy in the army, right? Like, because I think it's pretty functional. Like, that's the whole point, right? And so it definitely had a big place in the army, but not true CrossFit. Like, and that's how a lot of people, certainly like me, were like, hey, this is stupid. We're just fucking rattling around. This is stupid. Can someone give me some objectives here? And I think, that sort of painted my thoughts about CrossFit initially, even though it wasn't real CrossFit. It was like Steve had come out and shown us these things and we were like, yeah, we can replicate that. Fuck off. We don't ever need to pay you again. And we can just do it on our own.
That would have been about the era that boxercise sort of started taking off.
Maybe Zumba, yeah. And shaker weights. So anyway, that's the history of CrossFit. But we go through all that because you are a highly established person in the CrossFit world, certainly in Australia. To become a CrossFit instructor, they're going to meet you along the way, right?
For sure, yeah. Especially if someone does a CrossFit seminar in Sydney, I kind of do most of those. In terms of CrossFit seminar staff, there's only about 200 of us worldwide. Australia's got 10 of us. Like it's a pretty small community of those who train new trainers. So yeah, odds are most people who've done their level 1 in Australia, or at least in Sydney, I've definitely met along the way over the past decade.
So that's our CrossFit sort of introduction.
Yeah.
Why are you here? What parallels have you observed between dog training and CrossFit?
So this largely comes from an aspect of CrossFit, which, to touch on what you were talking about of like, hey, this doesn't really work for us. The true nature of CrossFit actually does. And it's a misunderstanding of, well, what's CrossFit intent? What's its methodology? What's it really trying to do? The goal of CrossFit, and CrossFit has a definition, which is we're trying to increase a person's work capacity across broad time and modal domains. And there's a lot to unpack to kind of understand that, which I'll try to in simplest terms. The parallel is before CrossFit defined fitness, being the first fitness program to actually bring about a scientifically rigorous definition of fitness. You can open up Webster's dictionary, look up fitness, and you'll just see the act of being fit. Right? It doesn't really work. So CrossFit sought out to define fitness. The parallel that I drew to was before CrossFit defined fitness, it kind of borrowed some ideas from other areas. Where this idea that I came to you guys about, hey, can I talk about this? It was one of your episodes last year talking about balance training and positive only. And it always seems to be that those two conversations come from two different places. We're not talking about the same objective central point of like, why do we train dogs or what is a trained dog to begin with? So this whole thing is to try and, the analogy I said to you guys earlier, like, hey, let's put the salt shaker in the center of the table. Let's find where the center of the table is, justify why it is the center, and put it there. The next person to sit down, if they choose to move it because they don't think that's the center, it's our job to go, no. Here's where the center is. Here's where we're talking from. So that sort of started it all. Now, CrossFit's definition of fitness is, as I said, work capacity across broad time model domains. It's quite objective in humans. So we can take, how much weight did you move? How far did you move it? How long did it take? That's physics of force, distance, and time gives you average power. What we do is we take that for every conceivable physical task we can imagine, right? 100-meter sprint, 400-meter swim, max body weight deadlift, whatever you want to do. Marathon run, marathon row, the next thing. By using that equation, you get a bunch of data points. You take the average at a certain time. So let's take 10-second effort, 100-meter sprint, max weight deadlift, max weight back squat, a bunch of them. You work out the average power, you get a data point. You do that across all time, you now get a curve. The area under that curve, if you have power on the y-axis and time on the x, that area is your fitness, right? It's an objective measure of how fit you are, which is essentially why CrossFit can claim to have the fittest on earth, because we go, well, this is our definition of fitness. Here's the salt shaker in the center of the table. Here's why we say it. Prove us wrong. No one has yet, which is why CrossFit's still cool, right? But yeah, that's our definition of fitness. So it got me to thinking, like, could we apply that to dogs? Like, could we go, is one dog, like, quote unquote, fitter than another based on, is it trained better than another dog? Let's take a sit as a behavior. Can it sit for a second? Can it sit for 10 seconds? Can it sit for 5 minutes? Cool. Can it sit for 5 minutes while the owner's not around? Can it do that while it's off lead? Can it do that while there's other distractions going on? Like, we can make this as big as we want to, but get a bunch of data points and actually kind of graphically represent how trained that dog really is. And that's the parallel that I drew to it.
Right.
Yeah.
We're coming up with this idea that you said something interesting, that under the curve is your level of fitness, right?
Yes.
So we're saying this is what you're capable of. Another way of saying that would be, this is where you will fail, right? Like, at above this is where it falls apart. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it would be accurate.
Yeah.
And obviously the goal is to try and raise the area under the curve, which is, why you train and exercise and do whatever. But yes, essentially it shows the margins of your experience or the point at which you will fail.
Yeah. And so then in terms of dog training, we would then say, this is what the dog will be capable of. This is what you can expect in any given situation from the obedience behaviors that you have. This is what you can rely on the dog being able to do. In the same way you can rely on being able to run 100 meters in a certain time, you can then say, oh, well, I know that I've measured and this dog is capable of X because we know the space under the curve, but the curve itself is the failure point.
Correct.
Okay.
Which should therefore theoretically drive your training, right? Because if the goal in fitness is to raise the area under the curve, and that's the entirety of the curve, your training should therefore stress that in such a way that allows you to produce more power in different modalities of training or different modalities of work across a broader range of time. So if you were to say, do that and go, well, I know the dog can reliably do this behavior to this point, my training therefore needs to address that. But not just address that, address the entire area under the curve. Because otherwise you'd end up, what we'd call in fitness a bias. If you had to say a pretty balanced level of fitness and decided that you were just going to lift heavy weights for a long time, you would get a lot stronger. It would raise your area under the curve in that short, high power domain, but your longer duration stuff would suffer. So it's not necessarily trading one for the other, but how can we increase the overall capacity while still maintaining all the other areas? That's kind of, yeah.
How do you see this, the direct translation to this? Like, what do you think are the things that we should measure in terms of dogs?
That to me circles back a little bit to, what you're talking about when Steve brought CrossFit into your unit, right? Where it's like, hey, this isn't really for us, because your job in the army wasn't exactly general physical preparedness of the average person on the street wanting a level of fitness. Where I think this draws to is the average pet owner would have different needs to a sport dog. There would be a lot of parallels that overlap. You still want that dog to be stable and to still understand obedience, and if it's so desirable to you, to come into the world and do whatever. But I think you kind of need to understand what your end goal is with the dog to begin with. Largely where this came from is where the force-free or positive-only community would go, well, hey, you can't train that way because some ideology that they don't like. We go, well, hang on, I need my dog to live with me, compete in the sport, and be happy and healthy while he does that. Prime example, my dog, right? I compete in PSA. My dog's also my buddy, lives in my house, free to roam. He comes to the gym with me every day. He is off lead. He lays at the front of the class while there's 30 people training, dumping barbells. Stable, chilled, doesn't do anything, just sleeps at the front. So what does a dog need? I think that's a subjective question to the individual of what do you want from your dog?
Yeah.
But I think we could all agree that we should have a dog that knows how to switch on, knows how to switch off, is stable, can come when called, will down when down, and won't move until you tell it to. I think there's some really basic stuff that every dog should have.
Yeah. So I suppose, like, in line with the idea that we're trying to draw comparisons to this measure that CrossFit has sort of brought of like measuring what a fit person is or measuring fitness in a person, applying that template to dog training and then saying, well, this is a measure of a trained dog, like how well trained that dog is. I suppose one of the issues, like the pushback will for sure be that we kind of have that in that we have various tests that you can do with the dog. So whether you want to do, like if it's just a random dog, like that you're not looking to achieve a particular thing, there's the Canine Good Citizen test, which we don't really have here in Australia, but that's a thing that gets done in the US. What's the sort of ANKC equivalent here, Glenn? Are you aware of anything that's the same kind of thing?
Oh, it'll be like a breed standard test or something like that.
Yeah. And then, like say outside of the big established powers in dogs, you're then looking at something like a SR test, like the social responsibility test within GRC. Or if you're then looking to go into protection sports, even though, like in PSA, Mondio, those sorts of things, you don't require a BH. Well, in Mondio, you have to have some sort of aptitude testing, but the BH kind of forms that function for a lot of bite sports dogs. There's no requirement to do that in PSA, but certainly in IGP, that's the gateway assessment to say, if you have not hit this bar, you cannot continue. Like, I suppose.
We have the PDC.
Yeah, so we'd have the PDC, for sure. I suppose the question is, what's the difference between what's existing there and what you're kind of proposing?
So I'm not necessarily proposing a change in anything. What the thought really was is trying to bridge the gap between, us that would call ourselves balanced trainers to those that would go force-free, don't ever use tools, right?
Good luck.
I know, right?
I'm trying to remain optimistic.
We can all hope. But it's essentially trying to remove subjectivity and ideology and just go, hey, can we have an objective agreement on what a trained dog is? Not how you might test for what that training is, but an agreement around an objective measure of that dog has training or that dog does not. Pushing that a little bit further is, okay, well then how do we train the dog, right? So, CrossFit knows how it produces really high levels of fitness. It uses constantly varied functional movements executed at high intensity, builds really high levels of fitness. The way that we would assess any fitness program in CrossFit is to balance off safety, efficacy, and efficiency of it, right? So for humans in CrossFit, safety, what's your chance of getting injured? Like efficacy, does it get the results you want? And efficiency, does it get your results in a meaningful time frame? I could sit here and promise you guys to get you 20 unbroken strict pull-ups in the next month, but 95% chance you're going to die. Like you're not going to want to do that, right?
Yeah.
In the same way I can say, well, I'll guarantee you 20 strict pull-ups. It's only going to happen in 15 years, but I promise you won't even tear a hand. And by the way, it's going to be on a monthly direct debit and I'm going to charge you through the nose to get, right? Same thing. It's trying to bring an objective conversation to go, well, sure, we can talk about not using tools and only using positive only training, but how much fitness, quote unquote fitness, does that get you on your dog? And in what kind of time frame does that happen? And is the dog safe? Sure. You could argue that it's, well, the balance community might argue and go, well, they're safe from tools on it. But what about its mental safety or the safety of the handler or safety of the public in a dog that might be quite dangerous that you won't use tools to control, right? Or sure, we can get that behavior that we want positive only, but it's going to take us 8 years. And now the dog can't really enjoy that aspect of life. It can't enjoy being off lead, running in fields and at the beach because it won't recall, because you won't use some sort of punishment or negative reinforcement to bring that dog back to you in its early stages of training. So yeah, it's not necessarily a new way of looking at things. I guess it is, but it's not trying to go, hey, we should replace A with B. It's really going, can we just put the salt shaker in the center of the table and all talk from the same point and agree that, yes, this would be a good way to objectively assess a trained dog, be it sport or a pet dog? Can we agree that, yes, safety of the dog, safety of the handler, safety of the public is important? So is getting results, and so is getting results in a time frame that actually means anything to us.
Yeah. Then tell me about like plotting that graph. Is that something within, say, the CrossFit framework? Is that something that people do? Like people who are like you, right? How often are you measuring and actually plotting that graph?
That graph itself is somewhat theoretical in the CrossFit space, but I record 90% of my workouts and I will draw on that because we have an app that records everything. So I will look and go, all right, is my back squat number going up? Right?
Yeah.
There's a particular CrossFit workout. I did it this year. I did it last year. Is my time faster? And it's just being able to use various data points that I can go, yes, my fitness is improving. Right? I'm getting stronger. I'm getting faster. To actually like spend the time to sit and plot that, it's somewhat theoretical to actually do it, but your logbook would tell you, hey, are you getting fitter? Are you getting stronger? Are you getting faster? Just based on those general numbers.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Gav, just based on what you're sort of laying down at the moment. Let's say a miracle happens. The government steps up and says, Gavin, we want you to conscript some sort of a plan that will work across the broad spectrum of Australian dog owners, that we can have a minimum standard of obedience that's measurable based upon the algorithms that you're laying out at the moment. You put something out there and then you get hit with violent opposition because you're laying down that there has to be some use of force at some point in time to be able to maintain at least the lower end of that standard. How would you overcome that sort of situation? What I'm trying to lay in here is the realities of how people work based on the story that I was telling you and Pat earlier.
Of course. I would probably start by asking people smarter than me in the dog space, if I'm honest. Yeah, I know fitness. I've only been in dogs a little while.
That's a fair and reasonable thing to do, because the rule of the kingdom is the king doesn't make all the decisions. The king has a wise council of people around him to basically sit with and say, all right, well, what should we do in order to maintain the kingdom? The nobles who form part of that council should come back and say, the lands that I look after, the people of those lands are suggesting this and they're afraid of this, or they feel that there's too many taxes here, or they're worried about invaders coming in, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where the king basically sits on the throne and deliberates. Okay, well, you know, like I've had some really wise counsel. Now I have to make some decisions based on it. So I agree with you. You should reach out to people and consult with smarter and wiser people that have experience and skin in the game, so to speak. But I think the issue that we find, fuck it, I'm going to tell the story. I feel it's only fair. I feel it's only fair.
Do it.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to cave to Pat's peer group pressure.
For context, often when we're going to have a podcast, we kind of sit around and we go, okay, how are we going to map this? And I regularly, because it's something I heard, I can't remember who I heard this from, but when in podcasting, I remember someone saying like, don't speak prior, right? Because you leave that, and then you have this fake contrived conversation.
Yes.
So we were just discussing and Glenn got into a story and I was like, stop, tell this story on the podcast. He goes, no, I can't say that. And people will get too upset at me. And here it comes.
As many of you know, through the history of us chatting about our lives and our experiences, I used to be a training director for the Rottweiler Club. Part of my conscription to do that was helping the membership committee to come up with ideas of things that we needed to do to improve obedience. Once again, I had a great collaboration with some former members, and I also brought in a lot of new blood from NDTF and ADT and all the areas that I was involved in to help construct and fix a problem that they obviously had. And the reason we knew they had a problem was 5 people were turning up to training. During that time, the committee came to me and said, for all our membership, there's a lot of people, for one reason or another, don't or won't come to obedience, but we still want to lead the way in the Australian landscape based on the bad rap that the breed is actually getting. What we want to do is we want to devise some form of breed standard as a test through obedience that we can devise that our dogs are at least doing this as a minimum. So if anyone comes to us and says, what are you doing to fix this problem? Here's what we're doing to fix the problem. We're going to put the dogs under a minimum standard.
To be clear, let me interrupt you. That is self-policing 101.
Yeah.
Right? You've gone, okay.
Something a breed club should do.
The Rottweiler as a breed is somewhat under fire. When was this?
Oh, this was back in the early 2000s.
Okay, so Rottweilers in Australia, still a massive breed, considered a working breed still. The Rottweiler Club is probably, even now, I remember when Neville won the show, it's massive, right? Like
Victoria was huge.
Yeah.
Like Victoria, the combined clubs of Australia still didn't have the membership that Victoria did.
Yeah.
So Victoria was a big club.
Huge.
It was a heritage club and a big club. So
hundreds and hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And the breed itself, because of the way that Rotties were being used in security and stuff like that, as well as not in security. So you've got...
They're just a popular breed at that time, in the 90s.
But in the space, you've got people being bitten by them who are meant to be being bitten. These are people who are told, stop, get back. And they go, no, fuck you and your dog. And then they're like, oh no, I'm bitten. Right? So fair, just and reasonable, lawful bites, but also a lot of dickheads with these dogs, right? And a lot of people getting up to fuckery and some
people outside that self-policing group.
That's right.
Yeah.
So as the club, the Rottweiler group of people, which you're a member of, was like, oh, fuck, not just we should be seen to be doing something about this, but we should, within the power that we have, which is nothing over, we don't actually have any power over people who aren't members of our organization. And even then, it's not like people have to be a part of this organization. But you guys decided we should do everything that we can to ensure the safety of the community from our breed and do everything that we can to present the best version of our breed. Like keep these dogs as well trained, as capable as we know that they can be.
Absolutely.
That was your plan.
That was the plan.
Okay.
It was actually the brainchild of, I'm going to say, the then president, Mick Svelchik, who I really loved working with Mick. He was a fantastic and very progressive president at the time. Vice president was a very good mate of mine, Simon Ward, who actually brought me in to run the club. And Simon helped me. He used to travel from Geelong all the way to Melbourne, which is a significant drive. It's basically like coming from Newcastle to Sydney every day. And he'd come down, help me train dogs and then go home again. Terrific people, loved them. There was wonderful and supportive men and women who were in that group who all said, yes, we need to do this.
Yep.
So I said, cool, I think that's a great idea. So I went to work and I sat down and really started to plot out what a minimum standard for a breed club should be. And it was even advised that members wouldn't be able to go on to show their dog unless they did this minimum standard.
Right, okay.
So they would...
there was something that was like, you have to buy in.
Yeah, it was definitely a buy-in. So a barrier to getting into shows.
Yeah.
Showing was extremely popular. That's where we made all the big money.
How's the club making money through showing? Explain that to me. You're charging entry fees.
Yeah, you charge entry fees and, but you need to because you've got to bring out specialty judges.
Yeah, there's a lot of costs
involved. So you
renting
pay
grounds and all that shit.
you pay your annual membership, you pay to enter the show. You'd also pay to come to obedience, but it was cheap. It was like $5 for the hour or something like that. So we looked at this as a barrier to entry to say, okay, unless you're doing this, you can't go on to show your dogs. And that was a suggestion at the time. Now, already you could hear the drums of war beating. The people were sort of saying, okay, well, what's this going to look like and what's going on? So I sort of sat down and, I wrote it out and I looked at some similar tests that were around the world at that time involved in, Schutzen and so forth. And I thought, even the BH is going to be far too complex and just out of reach for what we want to do there. Let's do something a little bit more similar, but it doesn't have that higher expectation. Even though BH is still just like an entry-level test, I thought, let's be a little bit fair and reasonable. There's a lot of people who...
The BH is a hard test.
The BH is a hard test, and it takes months to prep for it. There's people who spend a whole 12 months of their dog's life just for the BH. But then they, it also helps them progress onto other things. Anyway, I digress. As I was writing it, same thing that you suggested before, I was reaching out to people and saying, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And people would come back to me and say, yeah, I think that's fair. I think that's reasonable. Like I started with something like a 3-minute downstay with mild distraction off lead. And it was all things that we were doing with ADT. Like ADT in advanced obedience, it was something like a 10-minute downstay with extreme distraction. So I thought that's way too hard. It's way, way, way too hard. So we really shaved a lot of ice off it. At the end of it, I kind of looked at it and I thought, well, this is more than fair. Like it was social walking, which is loose leash walking. It was a little bit of healing. So I think it was healing by your side for 20 paces with a right turn and a left turn at like 20, 20, 20. Okay, that was it. And then it was a sit stay at the end of it. It was a recall at, I think it was like 20 meters. It was a recall. The dog could either return to front or return to heel. Didn't really matter. It wasn't being judged for a trial. It was just simply an entry-level test. I looked at it, and the first model I did, I even shaved it down because I thought, people are going to object to this because I just know what people are like, especially when I sort of got the tempo of how people felt about things in the club and, anything that was too difficult, people started to complain and whinge about.
So before you keep going, let me just recoup. The test itself actually is, can the dog walk on a loose leash?
Yes.
Can the dog give attention to healing for a few moments?
Yep.
Just so that, real world application
it's probably no more than 2 minutes.
Yeah. So real world application is I just got to get my dog through this difficult situation.
Yep.
I can pull
There was no
attention.
change of pace, anything. It was just one right turn, one left turn.
Yeah.
Not even about turns.
Yeah. A recall.
So
the dog will come when you call it
and
stay where you tell it to stay for a very short period of time.
Yep. That was pretty much it. And I think the dog had to sit and stay with the owner on lead while the dog walked past within a 5-meter radius.
Okay.
So
this almost sounds like a test that any average pet dog owner should be able to pass.
Exactly. When this came about, like I said, the drums of war were already beating. But by the time it came to the annual general meeting, there were people everywhere at the general meeting. Like there were people turning up in droves. And traditionally, people don't turn up to meetings unless they've got something to vote against. There were people,
a bug to bear.
There were people everywhere, and they were fucking furious. They literally wanted to take me out to the car park and string me up in a tree. That's how mad they were about it. The one thing in particular was the barrier to entry on showing the dogs. They were fucking furious about that. It was how dare you, and people were really, really emotional about it. There was threats and carry on going on. And I just said to them, this is the problem. This is the very problem that we have, because if any media steps up right now, if anyone from the government comes in and says, what are you doing to address the claims that are in the media at the moment that the Rottweiler is a villain and not enough has been done by it? Because you would get people within the club who were involved in media at the time saying, the Rottweiler is a great breed, it's a great family breed. And then they would have the setup dog with kids that, the media would go around and take pictures of. And it's not that that dog wasn't great with families, but there were dogs in the club that weren't great with families. There were dogs in the club that weren't great with people. There were dogs in the club that weren't great with other dogs. That was the issue for people because they knew, I have to do some hard work here. I have to raise the bar to a level of standard as everybody else, and that's not fair.
I'm curious about something.
Yeah.
The pushback and disagreement that you got, was the pushback at the point of we should have a test? Was the pushback at the point of the test should include some aspect of loose leash walk? Or was the pushback at the point of this is what the test is for loose leash walk?
The pushback was mainly the barrier to entry for showing.
Yeah.
That was the big one.
Okay.
That was the one that people found that was very unfair, that they should have to do this in order to be able to then show the dogs, when previously they were just allowed to show the dogs without any entry test or anything like that. The other side of it was they felt that for a lot of dogs who were elderly and had been in society for a period of time, it wasn't fair to them where younger people with puppies or younger dogs could easily go into this test and get through. But as I said to him, it's not something that we're just going to and, you know, the president and the committee supported this as well. They said it's not something that we're just going to launch on you right now. We're actually going to get it ready. And the club, which Glenn and co-run, is going to support you that you can come down there on Wednesday nights and train for it. We will map it out and we will show you how to do it. That just didn't fly. They still found every solidified reason under the sun to find out how unfair it was and how we'd set them up to fail. But in our minds, we actually thought, well, we're doing a great thing by our member services here. You know, like we're looking to solve a problem where there is a real risk to the BSL, the breed-specific legislation. The breed-specific legislation, thanks, Pat. That was a real incredible threat to Rottweilers at the time. There were some real angry people in the community about how many people were getting mauled by Rottweilers. Now, none of them were members of clubs. You know, and it's the same thing with sporting dog clubs. I don't know anybody. Look, there's been fuck-ups from time to time, but I personally don't know anybody whose dogs in sporting clubs that I've been involved have really fucked somebody up.
I tried looking into that and I asked around. I asked around when last time the bite sports ban like reared its head. I really asked around a lot of people and was like, hey, are you aware of any dogs with titles or in anything that have bit someone they shouldn't?
How the fuck could they? They're too busy training.
Yeah, that's right. And there's plenty of stories of people like, oh, you know, I caught a canine under my thumb while I was playing like there's plenty of people who have been bitten by a dog.
Yeah, it's just an occupational hazard.
But they count as dog bite stats.
Yes,
like if you get medical attention, and like fuck me, I've got some medical attention for some dog bites in my time.
Yeah.
But the majority, like almost, actually, you know what? I've only got medical attention for like hand bites because of bad presentation like twice. But I've had my hands and arms stitched up from fucking nervous pet dogs wailing on me plenty of times, right? But the bites, like if my PSA titled dog accidentally puts a tooth through my thumb because I've presented it poorly on the tug and I go to the doctor to get that flushed out.
Yeah, it's part of a statistic.
That's a dog that is trained to bite and bit someone.
Yep.
Right?
That seems really problematic.
Yeah.
Like if we think, right, like bring it back into humans for a second, to be charged with murder, you need like, there needs to be a mental aspect, intent and the act.
Yeah.
But if you just like by accident through whatever, like, yes, it's manslaughter, it's still a thing, but it's not the same degree.
Yeah, that's right. But dog bite's dog bite.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just gets recorded dog bite. And they ask what breed. And I never say, I lie every time. Fucking Chihuahua got me good.
Just give some sort of oodle name.
Yeah.
That's the biggest tooth I've ever seen on a Chihuahua.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the thing. Like it's not relevant, right? Like it was because this happened not because of a lack of training. There's no aggression in this. This is because...
it shouldn't be a markup against a dog.
The way that I'm moving all flary when I'm playing the dog and I happen to catch my thumb on the side of his tooth as it went past. Like I was whinging about it for ages because I had a canine go through my index finger and I mean through it, right? And that took a long time to heal. I've got the video of it. It happened in an instant and it was me trying to pull on a tug and on the string of the ball and the dog re-gripping on the ball and we just happened to collide. I immediately stopped this. This is all on film. I immediately stopped the session. The dog's like, hey, what's up, man? Like, why have we stopped? Like, there was no intent to do it. That's recorded as a dog bite because I had to get that sorted out. His fucking canine went through my index finger. So that's what I mean. Like, that's reflected in that way.
Back to the story. the people that weren't opposed to the changes were the people who were already turning up to training.
Yeah.
But they weren't interested in showing their dogs. They were interested in
The training.
just having their dogs be under better control.
Yeah. What you're suggesting, and certainly as you're saying then, Glenn, it just continually reminds me of when Jay started GRC.
Yep.
And I thought for a long time, I was like, oh, here it is, right? I was like, this is it. And it's been refined and refined. And I was a judge of it, but I'm not anymore because like initially when I first heard Jay explain it, I was like, fuck yeah, right? And it was before we were close. I was just listening to the Dog Training Conversations podcast. And it was one of the reasons why all the way back then, I think it was like, when was that? 2018 or something like that?
Even earlier.
Yeah. I reached out to Chad and Jay and was like, hey, you guys want to come to Australia? And part of the reason why I wanted to get them out was they're cool and teach and stuff, but I wanted to import GRC. And having some experience at the time, because I was a couple years into doing that with PSA, I was like, oh, I kind of know some of the barriers here. I know how we'll work through some of this stuff. I know how to get it going. And the first thing I knew was important was an exhibition. There has to be an exhibition. We have to show this. We have to do it. And that SR test is a decently hard test. But when I read it, I was like, well, this is great, right? Like this is an objective standard that it's written right here. This seems very reasonable. Like most dogs should be able to pass this. And at the end of the day, it is just a sport. Now, let me preface something before I go into what happened at that initial one, right? So later that week after the initial one, I competed. I did first time around, I did Valerie. I had to borrow a collar because I didn't even own a collar that fit her and the dog has to wear a collar while they do it. But I also did it with Remy, not at that first one. I did it like a week later when we did the one in Melbourne and did not pass, right? Because he didn't have a front finish and we were in preparation for our PSA 1 and I put him into a guard thinking on myself that would work and it didn't. But what happened was we did it at a football field. Jay was judging and then, people do their stuff. And at the end of it, we're packing up. The football teams arrive. There's people kicking footballs around. There's like the oval that we were using that was empty 20 minutes ago now has 200 kids on it that are all playing footy, right? In various training groups. And before we left, I was like, I'm just going to let my dog toilet before we go. And I open the crate and my dog goes out, no leash. And there's all this stuff happening. And he goes to the toilet and then I'm like, hey, get back in the box. And he jumps in the box. And Jay looked at me and he goes, fuck. And I was like, what? And he goes, well, there's no arguing whether your dog, it's called a social responsibility test. Your dog just failed it. But there's no arguing that your dog is socially responsible. Like that, he'd been living with me for 3 weeks and demonstrated, I just let my dog out into this public space. It caused no issues and in he got, but I did not pass the test. So I say that to preface that just because a dog doesn't pass a test doesn't mean that it's not suitable, not what the test is gauging. It just means it didn't go through those gates on that day. But at that first exhibition, there were a bunch of people that were like, oh, this is cool. This will be a fun thing to do. And we had a bunch of people do it. We had 3 people pass. And do you know who those 3 people were?
I want to guess Jazz.
It was Jazz. She got 100%. It was Dom from our PSA club with not with his PSA dog, just with his, like, what is Shadow? He's like a Corso mix or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Some kind of mastiff fucking dog, right? That is just his pet dog, is not a dog that I see him training, and me with Valerie, and nobody else passed. And there were a bunch of good trainers with their personal dogs that none of them passed. But as I sort of pointed out then, it was like, because we're people who are used to training to a standard, like somebody else's standard. And I think one of the most important things, and it's why I'm so obsessed with dog sport, and I use the same example all the time, is that it creates an objective standard that you have to work towards. And I think it's always important that when you set a goal as an objective standard to work towards, to make some sort of determination about training, it has to be somebody else's goal. It can't be your goal, because you set goals for yourself that are too easy. And it's one of the things I sort of say all the time is I used to swim a lot, right? As a training, modality, I used to swim a lot. And whenever there's no organized training program, like when I was in the army, do your own thing, a lot of the times I was up swimming. And it would be fair to say, oh, you must enjoy swimming. I fucking hate swimming. There is, now that I'm out of the army, there's zero chance that you're catching me going swimming as a workout. But I knew every year I have to tread water for 2 minutes in all my bullshit, like wearing all my army shit. and I have to swim 400 meters in 12 minutes wearing all of my army bullshit. And if I want to be able to fucking do that every year and keep my job, then I have to train that all the time because it's not something I'm good at. And when I had a parachute malfunction and fell out of a plane over the fucking horizon from my boat and had to swim for like 5 or 6 hours with another person, I was pretty goddamn happy that I had been forced to do all that swimming training, right? Because I wouldn't have done it myself. I would not have done that. But that standard was set, it had to be met, and I trained to meet it. And then when I was in a situation, the exact situation that they were preparing me for, I was like, well, I'm prepared, right? Away I can go. Now, I think the same thing, this is the opposition. This is why I was so, like, when you suggested coming on to discuss this, I was like, fuck yeah, because I'm into that, right? Like, I'm into setting an objective standard. But finding that standard to set is fucking hard because what we've seen with JRC is it was too hard for many, many people. And they wanted it changed. They wanted it made easier. They wanted the points changed. They wanted the thing changed. And it has over time. I'm not fully plugged into it, so I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't know the changes that have been made, whether they're good or bad. But I know that it has. And I think that's one of the issues is setting that objective standard of what is a trained dog. And I think that prior to that, we would all have to agree on like some form of testing of like, well, what is that? And let's put some dogs to the test without setting a standard of saying like, what will it be? And let's observe them to failure, right? Like we'll make the failure safe. Let's get some people's dogs and, you know, people who claim to have a trained dog or be good at training with their dog and go, cool, like let's do it down till the dog doesn't down anymore, right? Like let's standardize the level of distraction that all dogs will be under and let's see how long they go for. Let's put them into a particular environment and see if they can, whatever the obedience, whatever we decide that we're going to measure. And it need only be the things that you discussed. That's why I wanted to really tease out what they were. The dog can walk on a loose leash. Yep. Right. For just a few moments, you can maintain attention so that you can, if need be, get the dog through a difficult situation. That way, the dog can still be reactive because, like, you know, you have to deal within, like, one of the oppositions I think will always come up to this is me and you. We're both into health and fitness, but I ain't taking my shirt off in public. Like, I rarely see you with a shirt on, right? So like we are not the same and not all dogs are the same, right? Sure. So that's fair. But your dog's a bit reactive. Just be able to hold attention for 2 minutes. Just hold attention with him so that you can get him through this difficult situation. He has to be able to come back when you call him, right? Under varied levels of distraction. Doing that in a Skinner box does not fucking impress me. Like, let's at least do that on an open field. We don't need a bunch of stuff around, but let's do that in a situation where you might really do it, right? And let's ask the dog to stay somewhere just for 2 minutes so that in an emergency situation, you could say to the dog, hey, I need you to be here because I need something to help you. And in 2 minutes, I'll be back with that thing to help you, right? Which I think is something we've all probably done at one point or another with our dog. So I totally am about it. But how do you get buy-in from other people? That's the fucking hard part.
Well, I think largely we're talking about what's at the minute, right? Like, or how really? Like, how do we test this thing that we want? To try and bring the entire community in. The three of us are on the same page about pretty much everything relating to dog training, right? Like, you guys are the people that I've pretty much learned everything from. So I'm bought in. But can we bring in those who disagree with us? Can we take it back a few extra steps and find a point that we all agree, which is kind of why I asked you, Glenn, of like, at what point was there opposition? Was it the idea of having a test or the specific thing that was tested? So I think to get buy-in from everyone, can we strip back to a point where we go, hey, can we first agree that we need to have an objective measure? Can we then agree that the objective measure should include some sort of down, some sort of recall, some sort of attention? Now that we can kind of get on the same page and agree on at least a couple things, it might then be a little bit easier to go, well, okay, here's how we propose to test it and here's why. Like, this is what the center of the table is, you know?
That happened exactly as you mentioned. So we consulted with the members and said, we can see that we're not going to win this. What is it that you want? That's a difficult question to ask people before. And I resort to thinking about Henry Ford's comment when he said, if I asked everybody what I should do when I invented the motor car, all people would have come to me and said, get me faster horses. The issue was when we consulted the public, it resembled something that I was no longer happy to put my hand to. I read the reviews and I read what people said that they would be comfortable with. it was so far short of any measurable standard, which I thought was fair and reasonable to present to. And this was the thing that I said to people, the government aren't stupid. They're not going to look at this and say, that's outstanding. Well done, you. They're going to look at this list and go, the fuck are you guys? Who do you think we are? They don't know everything, but they're smart enough to know when they're being duped. And that's what I said. Nobody is going to look at this compromise and say, oh, that's awesome. Well done.
Yeah.
They're going to look at it and say, how dare you come up with a list like this? This is insulting. We're asking for at least a grade 5, grade 6 level, and you're giving us prep. And that's what it was. It was a prep level. I admire what you stand for, Gavin, because you remind me of me when I was at my prime and I was enthusiastic about all this. And I still am.
But you'll be jaded too someday, motherfucker.
Are you saying I'm looking at a mirror 20 years in the future?
Yes, pretty much. I still love the industry. I'm very supportive and I still want legacy. I still talk about this. So it's still something that I consult with people on a regular basis. Probably most of us do around the table. The issue is everybody's looking to fucking shorten everything these days. They're looking for compromise. And what you're saying, the balance community would dive all over that. Say, fuck yeah, bring it on. This would be great because they know that they could do it.
I don't know.
Not everybody. Okay.
Because this is the thing. It's not like GRC was watered down by force-free trainers.
That's true.
It's that people went, that's too hard. I don't want to do that. That's too hard. I haven't passed first time. I don't want to change my training. I want you to change this to suit my training. And I don't know that it's a force-free versus balanced training thing because, like the truth is, I like shitting on the force-free community as much as anybody else. That's not true. But there are some incredibly talented force-free trainers that couldn't fucking smoke a lot of balanced trainers.
Which we acknowledge.
And not just in their capability, but like what they can actually achieve with their dogs, right? Like, because, it's not like force-free training doesn't work. It just has limitations. And some people are so good, they'll never actualize those limitations. They're able to keep doing what they do. So I think the buy-in, like establishing whatever an objective test is, I think that should be done without any thought about the method to get there, right? It's just, this is what we should consider to be a trained dog, and how you get there, we can have that conversation afterwards.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
But I think that we need to just go, this is what we say is a trained dog, whatever it is. And until you have trained a dog to that standard and met it, your opinion is not welcome or relevant, right? So like you can have your opinion elsewhere, but this is the club of people who know what the fuck they're talking about and have demonstrated it, right? Like I say, it doesn't need to be a PSA 3. I'm just saying the dog can walk on a loose leash for a little bit, can give you a bit of attention for a little bit, comes when you call it. Not that far, but does the first time.
Yeah.
And stays where you tell it to stay for a little while under a mild level of distraction, right? Like I think that's probably a thing that is fair to say like, yeah, those are things that dogs should be able to do. And until you can demonstrate to me that you can do that, your opinion as a trainer is not relevant to me. And I think
unless you're a part of a membership committee where majority rules.
Yeah, well, that's the issue.
The problem.
That's exactly the problem. That's really what we're standing down the barrel of, is I think that if we set or agreed on this is what a dog who has training looks like, or this should be the minimum standard goal. Because, what I've just described is what I observe most random pet dog owners at the dog park capable of doing. Like, because lately, because, now I've got my own facility, I'm quite aware of the fact one of the reasons my dogs work so well around other dogs and are not distracted by them is because previously had no choice but to train that way. And it's important to me that my dogs remain neutral and able to work through being around other dogs. So at least once a week now, or actually just once a week, I take my dogs to the dog park and I go to the same dog park that I used to go to, which is on Norton Street in Leichhardt there, which is a fucking pretty busy road. And if there's no fences. So it's the kind of place that you can't take a problem dog to because it's too dangerous. And at that place, which is a totally off-leash area, you will see throughout the day, if you just go and hang out there, you'll see 100 people come and go that are not dog professionals, but have that skill set with their dog. They arrive to the park on a loose leash. They give their dog as much freedom. The dog's social, it runs around. When it's time to go, they call the dog. If for whatever reason, I've seen this, there's like the mower goes through, they can like, oh shit, I better protect my dog from that. They can call the dog over. So, hey, stay with me for a bit. That's just giving that attention for a couple of minutes. The danger goes through and they release their dog back out to it. And they're typically the kind of people who can tell their dog to stay just while they go and pick up shit bags or something like that. You know what I mean? Like perform some kind of like admin task. It's not like it's a crazy high standard. And I honestly think that if we were to suggest, or, you know, somebody in some position of authority was to say, okay, well, you got to be able to do that and measure it in order to call yourself a dog trainer, and people were opposed to that, I think at that point we've got to be like, hey, well, come on. Why? Because rando dog owners who have no interest in being professionals or giving advice or anything are achieving this all the time. The answer would be, well, my dog's reactive and you don't know my dog. It's like, cool, just get any other dog. Just fucking borrow someone else's dog and show us, demonstrate you can handle a dog through this situation. Because like, it doesn't need to be your dog. You just have to be able to walk the path with this situation, this kind of dog. And if you can't train that shit on a normal dog in 2 weeks, again, should you be a dog trainer?
Even after listening to all that you've said, even the consideration I had when I originally thought back to the design of this was to a standard where I observed other dogs within the club, like non-skillful people, normal mums and dads that were coming down to train their dogs. Like I would look at the standard that they would set within, let's say, a month of prep time. And that's part of the standard that I devised during that assessment, because I thought if they can do that in this period of time, there's no reason any other club member can't achieve this, even with some of the most difficult dogs. So I took into consideration difficult dogs. I took into consideration newer dogs. I took into consideration age of dogs, young, middle-aged, older dogs. Like I thought to myself, this is something that anybody could aspire to. It's a standard that anybody could look at. It was a real eye-opener for me of the resistance that I got to it. I was absolutely gobsmacked. I thought people were going to love it, going to look at it and go, yeah, this is great. I'm glad we're taking responsibility for this. Well done. Thank you very much. I couldn't believe it. Like I couldn't believe when
so many people turned up to the meeting, you were imagining yourself laying and them like a mosh pit. You were laying on top of them and they were throwing you in the around, just singing, Glenn, 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 Glenn. He's the best. He's our savior. Instead, they pulled out their fucking pitchforks.
Oh man, I was fucking Frankenstein's monster that night. I was waiting to get burned alive.
But the thing that it does give you is you can then turn to them and go, hey, I don't have to have this conversation with you now because I'm trying to set a standard. I'm trying to set an objective measure. You're not willing to have the same conversation as me. So
that's what I said to him, Gavin. I literally laid it down like that. I said, I can't understand, even after I made compromises to this, that you're not at least being considerate of it or offering me a reasonable alternative. Rather, it's just a grab for personal interest. You know, and that was the thing. It was so arbitrary, the argument that they brought to the table. I was absolutely shocked with it.
Yeah.
And I just said to him, well, what is it that you want?
Yeah, give me a well-constructed argument on why this doesn't work and give me an honest, well-constructed solution that I should replace it with, and we can talk.
But see, that's the faster horses example that I was given from Henry Ford's earlier example that I was worried about. Like, if I ask you this, you're just going to come back with some arbitrary response.
More shows.
Yeah.
More shows. We should do more shows.
More shows. Yeah. Which are great. I've got to be honest, there were a lot of people within the club that weren't being a part of the community problem. Like they were there to solve community problem. And I don't want this to sound like all the people in the club were villains. They certainly were not. A lot of people in the club were very helpful and they would spend a lot of time mentoring and helping people and raising their dogs and giving them advice. But it's sort of like it was a whip around mob mentality that went off, which really caught me off guard because there are even people there that I thought were allies of mine, which were part of the them group. They weren't part of the us group. They were part of the them group. And they were people that I'd train their dogs for them, that I'd help them and advise them. And even when I went back to them, I said, hey, what the fuck? I saw your face in the group. You were there literally chanting the death chant. What's going on? And they said, look, it's probably sounding a little bit more like a dictatorship than it is in something that we feel could have been more collaborative. And I said, there was never a dictatorship about this. It was an invitation to consider this with options to revise. And I said, but the revision is ridiculous. It's absurd. But anyway, all I'm talking to you about is past experiences. I really hope for the best, mate. I hope that people would embrace something that you're proposing. I'm doubtful when I read the comments on social media for just random posts when I see – I'll give you an example. On my own social media, I put up like a stupid meme clip of a dog, like he ingested something and it stuck to his poo. And as he's spinning around, the poo is spinning around and the guy's trying to jump out of the way.
We've all done that. We've all been there.
We've all done that.
Chased our dog around in circles like, oh, stop, I'll help you.
When I put the clip up, it's had something like 21 million views. It's my highest viewed clip I've ever put up online. But when I put it up, underneath it, I put in the write-up underneath it, I put in logical points. Every single meme that I put up is an attention grab, but underneath it, I put in training advice underneath it, like consider these things. So I put some thought into each one that I'm doing. It's not that I just throw it up there and rattle something away. I think about, okay, this is meme. What's it related to? How could I make this about training? How could I make it helpful? How could I make it a community service? Hardly anyone bothers to read that. They just go fucking either laugh their ass off at the clip, which the majority of people do. But then you get people in the group that go, oh, this is disgusting. How did you put up there? This is tampering with a dog. Other people go, oh, the dog's got a tapeworm. You think the amount of times I hear that, like the dog's got a tapeworm, or don't pull on that fucking string, you could disembowel the dog. This is advice that the general public gives.
Yeah.
So now I know I'm gauging how badly misinformed people are. And these are the people that decide futures in endeavors that you propose. And that's what fucking scares me about the general public is, what's that Rick and Morty thing? I'll take your booze because I see what makes you cheer or something like that.
Yeah, your booze don't worry me. I've seen what you cheer for.
Yeah. It's incredible that you get such outrageous diversity in the comments of people who will decide your fate.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me about the dog industry is that you can get a conglomerate of very well-established, very caring, educated people that have had a lot of experience, who have had a lot of dogs under their belt, have raised and trained dogs, have bred dogs, have raised and trained trainers, and yet they're disregarded for fucking old Jono at home who has as much or in sometimes more power in the vote than you do. That's what scares me.
Yeah, the world's never been changed by the masses as a idea, right? It's always the few. I think I'm not necessarily proposing something out there, but rather inviting, hey, is there anyone in the force-free, positive-only community who can at least sit down at a table with someone from the balance community and go, yeah, we can agree on some general terms to begin with, and now let's like have a discussion from that point. Not, you know, hopefully that then grows to a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, where eventually the Jonos of the world are like, suddenly my opinion doesn't really matter that much anymore.
I have a lot of faith in that. I honestly think that could happen. I don't think that that's a far cry because a lot of, like I say, like we complain about some of the force-free community, but they're not the real trainers. The real trainers who would buy in would be all about this.
Yeah.
Like I think that there's plenty of people who consider themselves force-free trainers that are, you'd be like, fuck yeah, I'm in on that. Like I totally believe that as well. Because, you know, they're real dog trainers. They're just choosing to do it in a particular way.
Yeah.
I think that what would be interesting though is, you know, I guess my question for you is when someone wins the CrossFit Games, do people then go, ooh, how does he train? You know, like people then look and
they
go,
absolutely do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of half the point of it is to go, hey, look, I do something. This is how I eat. This is how I train. These are the things I do. Of course, I'm a genetic freak, but I'm competing against other genetic freaks. Like you're into that category. And I have been proven to be the best. So then we like go, oh, your opinion's very valuable now.
Yes.
Right. And now let's have a good look at how you got to be the best. And I think having some kind of standard just means like, okay, cool. Like, let's see who gets there.
Yeah.
And I think that we'll probably find, especially if it's something easy like that, we'll probably find exactly as you pointed out, we can make some measurements. We can say, oh, well, who got there? How'd they get there? How long did it take them to get there? And we can start to sort of develop a picture of what is effective training. Wouldn't that be incredible just to be able to say that out loud? What is effective training? Here's the definition of it, and here's a bunch of people that have achieved it. If you want to be able to do it, here's a bunch of names on a website that you can check out these people who have met the standard.
Yeah, exactly.
How they got there, we don't know. That's up to you. Figure that out. But they got there.
And I think, you know, how long did that take to get there is an important question as well, right? So back to some of the things you covered on, loose leash walk, some attention and a downstay. Did they get there by the time the dog was 18 months?
Yeah.
That's probably pretty good. It's probably pretty useful. You're going to have a pretty good life with your dog if you can have all those things and go out in public and do all the fun things. Or, well, yeah, we got there, but the dog was 10, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly that's a little bit less.
Yeah.
And I think that's when, we can start to bring in that conversation around, well, what methods are you using to get there? Are you using the full spectrum of motivation, positive, negative reinforcement, or are you being positive only? And which one actually gets you the results that are meaningful for you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So,
Have you seen that guy? You'll probably know his name. He's the IGP guy who challenged Zach George to a $50,000 contest that both him and Zach should go into New York City and have their dogs off lead.
No, I didn't.
You haven't seen it?
No. I had to take Zach George out of my mind. I got too obsessed. I was getting too angry about too many things, and he was occupying too much of my mental space, and it just was unhealthy.
He's a IGP guy. He openly trains with tools.
Yeah.
He's got a remote trainer where people have called him out. He called Zach George out. He said, "Hey, mate, meet me in New York City. I will put $50,000 in an account." And he said, winner takes all, my dog against your dog in one of the busiest and most distracting cities in the world. And it's on. We're going to compete with each other to see whose dog can navigate the territory of New York City in an agreed period of time. So I don't know what's going to happen of it. Well, I do. We can all
exactly what's
guess
going to happen.
He's going to win his own $50,000 back.
Well, it's never
When
going to
old mate
happen.
doesn't turn up. Yeah.
Exactly right. So I hope he does turn up. I hope he agrees to the challenge and meets him out there, and we can all supervise it because it was going to be live filmed and everything like that, which I would love to see. You're right, Pat, with what you said before. There are many people in the scope of balance and force-free training that are people just getting on with their duties.
Yeah.
They're out there enjoying their dog and they're training their dog, and they couldn't give a fuck about all the noise online. And that's great, because that's the thing that I really admire about people is they don't spend too much time in front of a screen. They're actually out enjoying the dog. That's a wonderful relationship. What dog could ask a better life than getting out there involved in things? And this is why we don't see bite statistics in sports. I'm sure they're there if people are digging around for them, but it'd be such a minute, minuscule percentage. But the dogs that are out there involved in sports who don't bite the general public, they're just too busy to do it. They're living a very fulfilled life. They're healthy. Their well-being is being looked after. They're monitored. They're checked. They're with their family all the time. They've got specific cars that they've bought for them. They've got safety protocols in line for them.
Yeah.
Their whole lifestyle is laid out for them.
Dogs typically become dangerous through negligence, right?
Absolutely.
Like that's how dogs become dangerous,
Absolutely.
is from not doing too much cool stuff with them. It's from not doing anything with them.
Yep.
Dog sport people are fucking crazy. Every one of them to a T, and I can say that from deep within the community as one of the most crazy people.
I've
But
nominated that task many times.
Yeah, but the way that we live with our dogs is fucking not negligent. We do the opposite. I find myself, more often than not, telling people like, whoa, slow down. You're doing too much, right? Or I say to people who are, crying over the Zoom call to me about how things are going in their club, I'm like, do you have any other friends? Like, do you have anything else going on? Because maybe you should spend some time with some of those other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because this is not a super healthy community. But I tell you what, the problem is it is not our dogs.
Yeah.
We are not creating problems with dogs. We're doing the total fucking opposite. All right, that's been fun. I've loved ranting about that.
Did you squeeze out everything you did before we wildly interrupted you as we brought you in as a guest?
I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah. If it all made sense.
It makes
Applied.
sense.
The audience decides, mate. We have no
I know.
choice. We have no choice whether it makes sense or not. We just let the words fall out of our head and they determine whether they were good or not.
Yeah.
So as a caveat before we do wrap up, as I've suggested before, there are many wonderful people involved in all dog clubs that I've been involved in, and there are a conglomerate of crackpots as well.
Yeah.
But the unfortunate side is that people who do go out of their way, they do exercise a lot of thought and progress involved in trying to help the general populace. The problem is the general populace gets in the way of some very constructive and well thought out and well managed ideas. That's the disappointing side of it. So that goes for the Rottweiler Club as well. It was an honor and a privilege to serve in the club, to work with the people, and to be involved in some very progressive membership groups and committee groups. I'm not just saying this to blow smoke up their ass. I really enjoyed myself. I stayed there for 5 years. The only reason I left is because I had to move to New South Wales to do this job. I still would have been there. I would have stayed in the club. I enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the collaboration of wonderful-minded people. Thanks to Mick and Simon and many of the other people that were down there at the time, and even the other supporting members of the committee, I had carte blanche to do what I wanted to do in the training side of it. I could keep the politics out of it. I often did. I told people, don't bring your shitty politics down here. Don't bring your showline standard shit down here. Don't tell people about their fucking east-west pause and tell them that their ear carriage is not correct. Nobody gives a shit after the threshold of that door. And I would kick people out. I'd just say, hey, go outside. People would have to conduct their shitty, shady business in the car park because they weren't allowed in the building to do it. And I had the full support of the committee and the membership group to do that as well.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the people for letting me do that. Like I said, it was just an overwhelming surprise that the people outside of the obedience group were so violently opposed to something simply because it was a barrier to entry for them to get into their showing. Something that we were going to make simple, something that we were going to offer support to them, that really caught me off guard, and that really catches me off guard with a lot of things that people will sabotage the greater good for a selfish self-interest.
Almost sounds like when you were acting as a dictator, things worked really well. When everything went to committee, it kind of fell apart.
Inside of the club, I was a benevolent dictator. I was allowed to,
and everything
I was,
worked.
And it worked. It worked well. We had a good team. Like I said before, it wasn't that I didn't consult with my management group. I often did, and there were times where I had an idea or a thought in mind that this was something that I wanted to make happen, and I would put it to the team, and they would say no, and I'd say, "Well, give me rationale before you say no. You've got to present a formidable rationale for me to help me change my mind." And when they did, I would change my mind. Like I'd say, okay, you've presented me with a problem that I wasn't thinking about, which is fair and reasonable. I need to go away and think about it again. Or can I call on you guys to offer me a better solution? And sometimes they did. Sometimes they'd say, look, we don't know right now. Maybe we all have to think about it, or maybe you have to go back to the drawing board and present a few more options rather than just this single-minded approach to where you want to go. And I thought, well, that's fair. That's fair because I only have come down with one idea, and I can see that it's unpopular, and I'm meeting with a fair group of people. And when you do have that collaboration with a good group and a fair group of people, and they are opposed to something that you're suggesting, need I say that you should pay attention to what they're saying? Because the times that I haven't have led to the most problematic rebellions that I've seen in workplace and in sporting groups and in friendships and so forth. Sometimes when people are telling you to get out of your own way and you trust their judgment in many other practical cases, then it might be a good idea to take their sage advice.
Gavin, thanks for coming in, sir. If somebody wants to discuss some of this kind of stuff with you or just see you doing 32 kilo kettlebell snatches in your bite suit, how can they get in touch?
Instagram would be best, at Gav Crown on Instagram, or at gsd.flocky, which is...
That's your dog's account?
That's my dog's accounts where I post most of my dog stuff. My personal accounts, mostly CrossFit. So,
do you train your dog with your shirt off?
I haven't gone that far. I don't need the clickbait for that one. Although that's
so you haven't got a Gav Crown at OnlyFans account?
You're missing out.
Well, maybe. That being said, I've been doing a lot of weight pull the last couple of months, and the weather's been nice. So yeah, shirt's been off while I'm walking around the park dragging weight, but that's about it.
Yeah. Glenn will get you.
You're my first subscriber. That's now weird.
Absolutely.
All right, that's it. Another episode, Canine Paradigm. As always, if you like what you hear, like, rate, share, subscribe. Do that through whatever subscription service you download us from, and then just go do it to another one. They don't check. No one checks.
I'm sure someone does. I'm sure there is someone.
No, or it's part of the government efficiency thing.
Yes.
And now making sure
How dare you,
that's
Doge.
part of it.
How
You're
dare you.
only allowed to leave a review on things you fucking listen to.
Daddy Elon's onto you.
Yeah, Daddy Elon will get us.
Yep.
All right. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is to jump into Patreon. A few bucks a month gets you this giant backlog of information as well as new stuff going forward.
You did
I was
live today,
in
didn't
there.
you?
I was indeed. Yeah. 2 hours of answering questions in there, mostly talking about aliens.
Were you?
Nah.
Really?
But I finished a little bit early and I was waiting for Jazz to get there can do some stuff. And so I was like, well, fuck it. I'll just talk about aliens for a little while. I was like, we got a little bit of time. Anyone want to ask any other questions live? And it was like, aliens. I was like, all right, fuck it. Here we go. I'm quite educated now. I've gone deep down the rabbit hole.
Oh, I know.
I've gone all the way through the tunnel. And what's fun...
You've done Bob Lazar's online specialty courses.
No. Well, this is what's fun about my obsession with UFOs and aliens at the moment. It turns out there's a lot of different factions, right?
Yep.
Like there's a lot of different strong ideas about UFO and UAP and where they all come from. And it's fun for me because I'm not in any of them. You know, like I'm deep in factions in the dog world, right? Like deep. And I have these opinions that are sort of like, oh, fuck yeah, that is my opinion. I don't know about that. Like I'm constantly changing my opinion. But in the alien space, I'm bouncing around. Sometimes I think it's all fucking government conspiracy. Sometimes I'm convinced intergalactic federation.
So since they are declassifying JFK, RFK, and MLK, how long after do you think they're going to be declassifying all of the alien stuff?
Yeah, so it's part of the same group. So that group is doing JFK, RFK, MLK, 9/11, which is very fucking hectic. Interesting. To officially reopen that case implies that the case was never solved, right? So I think that's very interesting. That to me, being a person that essentially joined the army because of that and spent much of my adult life at war because of it, I'm very interested.
All I'm going to say is Building 7. That's it. That's where I'm going to leave my 2 cents on that.
But since we're wearing our conspiracy theory hats, I think that the UAP stuff is going to be a part of the JFK stuff. I think that
he was an alien.
No, but I think that he was interested in talking about, because around that time was probably at peak cover up of that sort of stuff. And
well, he wasn't buying into it. He wasn't having any of that shit from the Reserve Bank.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I think part of his assassination, there is for sure going to be some UAP stuff in his assassination. And I think what has for a long time sort of been thought of is that the things you can't know, like the reason they kept the JFK files sealed is not because of why he got killed, right? It's like, or who killed him. That's not the issue. It's the bigger picture of why and the questions he was asking and the pressure he was putting on people to fully understand that would open a lot of other doors that they don't want open. Yeah. Like knowing that it wasn't a magic bullet that like, that's obvious, right? But knowing the detail is interesting. So anyway, that's the rabbit hole I'm fucking going down. And I enjoy it. Frankly, it could all be bullshit, but I enjoy it.
Almost like you do something fun outside of the dog world that keeps you sane.
Yeah, fancy that.
I don't know about keeps me sane. I'd say more than anything, this is driving me insane. But I still feel pretty confident that UFO disclosure is a real conversation about that is coming this year. And I'm excited about that.
I might add too that I've noticed that Jane has started drawing a lot more UFO-centric sort of stuff recently.
Well, it's because I set the parameters.
Oh, wonder.
I set the parameters of the drawing challenges. Mate, you wait. I'll tell you something offline about an event for later in the year we're very excited about.
Yep.
All right, that's it for UFOs.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, hang on, we're still going. We're still doing the things. I still got more to say. I've told people about Patreon. I got to tell them buy our fucking t-shirts. We got to buy our t-shirts. Get in the spring. Links in the show notes. They're really cool. You look really cool. Get a tapestry for your wall. Everyone knows you're cool when you got one. Yeah, it's really important for everyone else to know you're cool. Right? No point being cool alone. You got to have other people know.
I think we should integrate a UFO into our tapestries.
Oh, we should make. You know what? Cool. Oh, we should get a whole new shirt. A UFO based shirt.
Yes.
Artists assemble! Okay.
Well, what about Jane? She's on this whole UFO kicker.
Yeah, but I'm forcing my wife to do more artworks for us.
Yeah,
this is probably not. But I mean, she probably will. Maybe I'll just make the drawing challenges. I'll just start doing components of it.
Yes.
I'll build it over time.
Yep.
Okay, and if you want to get in touch with us, get into the Facebook discussion group. That's where we group source information, see what's going on in the zeitgeist of the dog world, and discuss all the things about what we talk about on the show.
All
Jump
the things,
into there.
All the stuff. Yep.
And if you want to get in touch with us directly, shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Hope your dog lives forever. If it can walk on a loose leash and it can kind of like pay a little bit of attention, come when you call it kind of, and stay where you tell it to stay. That's all it needs to do.
Have the day you deserve.
Goodbye.